Okay. So I'm going to attempt to do this um, whole feature quickly for you to see if I can just show kind of how this works for the purpose of you and Kai and everyone else for that matter. Um, so the first thing we want to do is I'm going to actually look at what you put in for a poll that you sent me, and we're going to just do the equivalent of that. So this is a Kano poll you made, and this Kano poll, let's see it. Okay, so what you want is this new concept of a print ticket config. Um, okay, so what I was hesitated on is what we want to call this in the new world. We try to not use the word config because everything, everything in the core app of Noriega is configuration. So we need to think of a good model name that's, but sometimes it's really hard to not have the word config in it. So we've actually just failed and used that word. But print ticket config is fine, just for the sake of simplicity. So what you do is, the thing you have to know first of all is that Noriega has an app folder. And the app folder has a handful of apps. It has config, core, customers, data, email, invoices. These are all the apps inside Noriega. It's called an umbrella app architecture. So core is Kano. Think of that as Kano. So if I cd into core, at this point, I'm basically like in Kano. So just like any Postgres service, we have to make ecto ecto.gen.migration. So I need to make a migration, and what we want to say is add print ticket configs. And what this does is it makes a migration. Oh, hilarious. Okay, I was playing around with the new version of Elixir and it's confused. Anyway, and so I've got this new file created for me, and this new file is just an empty migration. Core repo, so I want to migrate inside the core app, this thing called this, and there's a whole lot of precedent for how to do this. So what I tend to do is find kind of an example just to start with. So you want to create a new table called core print ticket configs, and very similar. We have a rule in core, which is every single table, we can say without exception. We make some exceptions for join tables, but every table has an account ID reference. Accounts are partners in Noriega. So you're saying that these print ticket configs have an account, and oh, interesting. I got clever here, and I said that the account ID is the primary key. You know what? It turns out that that is what we want to do. So this is interesting, right? We don't need a primary key of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for these because each account only has one. So why not just make the account ID the primary key? It saves a column and adds the data integrity that we want to say that each account can only have one of them. I think that's probably a good place to start. Okay. And now we look at your other fields that you added, and you only have 2 of them. So let's do the equivalent of this in the Elixir world. So we want to add, one of these, who is a string, and we have a question of what's allowed. You know, are we allowed to have this be null or not? So it's worth thinking about. It's up to you. We tend to not allow null fields, but if this is truly optional where you don't have to have one, then null is obviously fine. If you decide you want this like standard logo and body image for everyone, we should probably have a default value for this. Anyway, and that's it. So now we have this new thing, print ticket config, who belongs to an account ID. It has a logo image that's a string and a body image that's a string. And we're done. So to run that migration, the simplest way to run it is just to restart your app. You can run it without restarting the app, but just for simplicity, let's just do it this way. So when I restart my app, what you'll see happens here is it's going to, whenever it wakes up, it's going to say that it's running it. So you'll see right here. So when it booted up, it said running core migrations add tickets. It created a new ticket, created this new table, core print ticket configs, and we're up. So now at that point, if we go into pSQL and we go to our core, we have this new core print ticket configs who has a structure that we set up. Right? So now we have this new data. So that's a good first step, right? In fact, for simplicity, what I'm going to do is I'm going to git checkout branch feature print ticket configs, and I'm going to add right, it's just a new file. And this is the first step. Add migration for new, just so you can see each step. Add migration for new model. Okay. So now that we have this new model, this new schema, or rather we have this new thing in the database, we need to make the model. Elixir doesn't have models because that's kind of an object-oriented concept. But what we really need is what they call a schema. So in the core app, let's look at the structure of the project. So inside Noriega rather, right, you have a folder for every app. Core is the app we've been talking about. Migrations live inside here, which is where we were just doing it. Everything else lives inside libcore. We pretty much have a folder for every resource. So what we can do, actually, is take one of these folders, and we can just use it as a template and start filling things in. What I actually might do is use a different one. I'm going to use pricing config because it's pretty similar to what we're going to be doing. So I'm just copying it, and I'm calling this print ticket config. Okay? So now we have a print ticket config folder, and we have a query, and obviously these ticket config. So let's just go through each one. Query is how we pull these. We put all of our database queries into a single file that can be used wherever you want to use them, but that way we don't sprinkle database queries throughout the app. So there's a query module inside print ticket config that says you can call find. So you could do something like find foo, and that would return the print ticket config whose ID is foo. And that's the only thing we allow you to do right now. We'll probably do some more things, but that's a good starting place. Schema. Schema, print ticket config, is what you can think of as your model. So we have this schema, and we have this core, this is the name of the table, print ticket configs, and it belongs to an account. Primary key true. This is the clever thing we did in our schema. We said, we're not going to have a normal primary key. Instead, your account ID is your primary key. That's what this magic does. And then, of course, we have to have our fields here. So if we go back to our add print ticket config, we have these two. Field, that, string. Okay? Just like before. So we have a field called logo, which is string, we have some timestamps. Okay. So now, this schema call is what makes think of it as a model. But this is just a module. So we want to be able to do some things like core print ticket config.changeSet. Change sets are how you change a schema, because again, everything's immutable. So we have this pricing config. Sorry, this is not a pricing config. This is a print config. This syntax right here is sort of like, this is telling you that you're going to get one of these. This is a placeholder for whatever module you're in right now. This prevents you from having to type this. every time, which is redundant because you're already in it. So it's kind of like this dot class in a weird sort of way, but it's not, obviously, because there's no classes. So this is saying I'm expecting that this function is given one of these, who I'm calling print config, and params. So this is the fancy pipe syntax we talked about. What this is doing is saying, take this and pass it in to be the first param of this, take the result of that and pass it in to be the first param of this. This prevents you from doing these crazy nested calls like this, you know, that well, not quite right, but that type of thing. It stops you from having to do that. So this is all fine, and you have to define your attributes. So I want to make sure that the required attributes, actually none of them are required. So account ID is the only thing that's required. This is here, and this is here. And this point we're good. And then finally we have these actions. Oh, Chris did this. There's only one action called upsert. We're going to get rid of this because we're not going to have that equivalent. I'm going to stop right there because Alex is